The Detroit Lions entered minicamp with several major storylines surrounding the roster, but one of the biggest developments involves a former second-round draft pick whose future with the organization may not be as secure as many fans believe. Levi Onwuzurike is suddenly facing one of the most important stretches of his Lions career, and according to reports coming out of Detroit, this minicamp period could play a significant role in determining where he stands heading into training camp. The pressure surrounding Onwuzurike is understandable. The defensive tackle is now working his way back from an ACL injury suffered less than a year ago, and while the Lions have remained patient with him, the reality of the NFL is that patience only lasts so long. Detroit has invested years into waiting for his potential to fully emerge, and now the coaching staff needs answers. They need to know if he can stay healthy, contribute consistently, and become an important piece alongside Aleem McNeill and Tyleik Williams on the interior defensive line. What makes this situation particularly interesting is that the Lions have already shown they are willing to move on from players who fail to solidify their role. Yet unlike some previous cases, there appears to be a belief within the organization that Onwuzurike still has untapped upside. Before last season's injury, many observers felt he was finally beginning to show the talent that made him a high draft selection in the first place. The flashes were there. The disruption was there. Most importantly, he looked healthy. That is why this minicamp matters so much. Detroit's defensive tackle depth is not overflowing with proven veterans, and if Onwuzurike can demonstrate that he is fully recovered and ready to contribute, he could become one of the biggest X factors on the entire defense. The Lions do not necessarily need him to become a superstar overnight. They simply need him available, productive, and capable of helping create a stronger rotation in the trenches. If that happens, Detroit's defensive front immediately becomes much more dangerous. Beyond the individual battles taking place across the roster, one of the most significant developments coming out of minicamp involves the direction of Detroit's defense as a whole. Defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard has made it clear that changes are coming, and for a fan base that has spent years waiting for the defense to consistently match the offense, that announcement immediately grabs attention. According to Shepard, the Lions plan to utilize the nickel position more frequently this season. That adjustment may sound minor on the surface, but it could have a major impact on how Detroit lines up against opposing offenses. Last season, Amik Robertson played a crucial role in the nickel spot, serving as a key piece of the defensive structure. With changes to the roster, the coaching staff is now evaluating multiple candidates to determine who can step into that responsibility moving forward. That competition is one of the most fascinating aspects of minicamp because it reflects a larger question facing the entire defense. Can this unit finally take the next step? For years, Lions fans have watched an offense capable of competing with anyone in the league, while the defense struggled to provide consistency. There have been flashes. There have been encouraging stretches, but the overall goal remains the same. Detroit needs a defense capable of complementing a championship-caliber offense. That is why several defensive players are under the microscope during these practices. One of the most important names being monitored is Ennis Rakestraw Jr. Injuries have limited his ability to fully establish himself, and the Lions desperately need to see continued progress. The talent that made him a highly regarded prospect has never been questioned. The concern has simply been availability. If Rakestraw can stay healthy and continue developing, he could become a significant contributor in the secondary. The same applies to DJ Reed. Health remains a major storyline, and the coaching staff wants to see steady progression as players continue working their way through the offseason program. Detroit knows it cannot afford to enter another season with constant uncertainty surrounding key contributors in the defensive backfield. Every positive report coming out of minicamp matters because building continuity now can pay major dividends once the regular season arrives. While much of the attention is focused on the defense, there is also an important battle taking shape along the offensive line. Christian Mahogany continues to be a player worth watching closely. Many believe he has a strong opportunity to establish himself at left guard, but nothing has been handed to him. Competition remains fierce. The Lions have assembled impressive depth across the offensive line, and several players are capable of making a legitimate push for playing time. Mahogany may currently be viewed as a front runner, but training camp will determine who ultimately earns those snaps. Detroit's coaching staff has consistently emphasized competition, and this position battle appears no different. Another rookie generating interest is linebacker Jimmy Rolder. Unlike some first-year players who arrive with expectations of immediate starting roles, Rolder's development will likely be evaluated differently. The coaching staff is looking for steady improvement. Can he absorb the playbook? Can he handle increasing responsibilities? Can he show growth from one week to the next? Those are the questions that matter right now. Not every successful rookie needs to become an instant star. Sometimes the most important sign is simply seeing a player improve each time he steps onto the practice field. That developmental process often determines who becomes a contributor later in the season and who eventually earns a larger role in future years. As intriguing as those position battles are, another name has suddenly emerged as one of the most interesting players on the entire roster, Anthony Lucas. The undrafted defensive end has generated surprising praise from both Dan Campbell and Kelvin Shepherd, and the comments coming from Detroit's coaching staff suggest this is not just routine offseason hype. Campbell pointed to the size, length, and athletic ability Lucas brings to the defensive front. Meanwhile, Shepherd revealed that when he studied Lucas's film from USC, one particular performance immediately stood out. According to Shepherd, Lucas was a disruptive force against LSU, consistently creating problems against offensive tackles, who eventually became highly regarded NFL prospects. Those comments naturally raise a question many Lions fans are already asking. How did a player capable of producing that type of performance go undrafted? The answer is not always simple. Every year, talented players slip through the draft process for a variety of reasons. What matters now is whether Lucas can capitalize on the opportunity Detroit has given him. Of course, expectations should remain realistic. The jump from college football to the NFL is enormous. A strong college performance does not guarantee professional success, but every season, one or two undrafted players surprise people. Every season, someone emerges from relative obscurity and earns a meaningful role. The Lions are hoping Lucas can at least put himself into that conversation. What makes his situation especially intriguing is how valuable an unexpected contributor would be for Detroit's pass rush rotation. The Lions understand that successful defenses rarely rely on a single pass rusher. The best units overwhelm offenses with waves of pressure, constantly rotating fresh players onto the field. If Lucas can prove capable of contributing even in a rotational role, it could provide tremendous value for the defense. Young, inexpensive players who can create pressure are exactly the kind of assets championship contenders need. The excitement surrounding his potential is growing, but the real evaluation is only beginning. Training camp practices, preseason games, and future roster decisions will reveal whether this early buzz is justified or simply another offseason storyline. What makes all of these developments so compelling is that they connect to the same larger objective. The Lions are not simply trying to build a playoff team anymore. They are trying to build a team capable of making a legitimate championship run. Every roster battle, every defensive adjustment, every emerging young player contributes to that goal. And as minicamp continues, the biggest question may be this: could one of these overlooked players become the unexpected difference maker that helps push Detroit closer to a Super Bowl? The possibility of hidden contributors emerging from this roster becomes even more important when you consider where the Lions currently stand as a franchise. Expectations have never been higher. This is no longer a team simply hoping to compete for a playoff spot. Detroit is being viewed as a legitimate contender, and with those expectations comes a completely different level of pressure. That pressure affects everyone. Veterans feel it because they understand the opportunity in front of them. Young players feel it because they know every practice rep could determine their future. Coaches feel it because every decision will be analyzed throughout the season. What makes this minicamp period so fascinating is that many of the answers Detroit is searching for may already be developing right now, long before the first regular season game kicks off. Take the defensive line as an example. The Lions know they have talent. They know there are players capable of making an impact, but potential only matters if it translates into production on Sundays. That is why the continued development of players returning from injury is so important. The coaching staff needs to determine who can be trusted, who can handle a full workload, and who can consistently execute within the defensive scheme. The encouraging aspect is that Detroit appears to have more competition competition across the roster than it has had in previous years. Competition creates urgency. When players know roster spots are not guaranteed, practices become more intense. Every drill matters. Every opportunity becomes valuable. That environment often brings out the best in athletes, and it is one of the reasons Dan Campbell has been able to establish such a strong culture within the organization. The quarterback room is another example. While Jared Goff remains firmly established as the starter, the conversations surrounding depth have become increasingly interesting. Luke Altmaier's early praise has generated excitement because fans love seeing underdog stories develop. Every team has players who arrive without much fanfare, only to force coaches to take notice through performance. The challenge for Altmaier now is consistency. Handling pressure during off-season workouts is one thing. Continuing to impress when the intensity increases is something entirely different. Training camp will bring tougher evaluations. Preseason games will provide real opportunities to showcase decision-making, accuracy, and composure under pressure. The fact that people are even discussing his chances this early says a lot about how he has approached the opportunity. Meanwhile, on defense, the adjustments being implemented by Kelvin Shepard could end up becoming one of the defining storylines of the entire season. When a coordinator talks about utilizing more nickel packages, it signals an effort to adapt to the modern NFL. Offenses continue to spread defenses out, attack mismatches, and force defenders into space. The Lions are clearly looking for ways to counter those challenges. The success of that approach will depend heavily on personnel. Can the defensive backs step up? Can the linebackers adjust to different responsibilities? Can the defensive line generate enough pressure to help the secondary? Those questions are interconnected. Defensive football is rarely about one player. Success usually comes from multiple units working together. A stronger pass rush helps the secondary. Better coverage gives pass rushers more time to reach the quarterback. Improved communication reduces mistakes and limits explosive plays. That is why Detroit's coaching staff is paying attention to every detail during these practices. For fans, it can be tempting to focus only on star players. The headlines naturally gravitate toward the biggest names. But championship teams are often built by the players lower on the depth chart who develop into reliable contributors when their number is called. That is exactly why names like Anthony Lucas are receiving attention. Nobody is suggesting he will suddenly become the face of the defense overnight. However, if he can provide quality snaps, contribute to the pass rush rotation, and continue developing, that could be a significant win for the organization. Finding valuable contributors without spending major resources is one of the most effective ways to strengthen a roster. The same principle applies throughout the team. Every successful season includes unexpected contributors. Every playoff contender eventually relies on players who were not considered major storylines months earlier. Injuries happen, opportunities arise, depth gets tested. When those moments arrive, organizations need